I, Julian Manning, am the top salesman at a car dealership, and I never refuse any customer's request. But today, I turn away a regular customer who comes in for a free maintenance service. My colleague is stunned. Are you crazy? He's our biggest client, who's about to buy the only $4 million top spec car in the store. I nod and reply, that's right. He's exactly the one I'm refusing. When the store manager sees the customer, Marvin Haas, angrily raise his phone to file a complaint, he rushes over to smooth things over. Mr. Haas, please calm down. He's new and doesn't know better. Please come inside, I'll personally take care of everything. I step to the side and block the entrance. No. If you let him in, I'll resign right now. Marvin's face turns red with anger, and he points a trembling finger at. I'm just here for a free maintenance. Is this really necessary? I meet his gaze and say solemnly word by word. Yes, it is. When the customer, Marvin Haas, heard what I said, he completely lost it. Throwing his car keys onto the ground, he questioned. What kind of training do you give your sales representatives? I bought the most expensive car you have, and yet this is how you treat me. Everyone in the showroom turned to look. A few customers who were in the middle of signing their contracts even put their pens down to come and check out the situation. What's going on? Why are they arguing? I heard he bought the top-of-the-line model and came in for free servicing but got stopped at the door. Why wouldn't they let him in? What kind of messed-up rule is that? Seeing a crowd gathering, Marvin jabbed a finger in my face and yelled, Everyone, it's this salesperson right here. He's the one who stopped me at the door, even though I had bought a car here and came for my free service. I paid $4 million for that car. $4 million. The crowd broke into murmurs. They won't service a $4 million car? They have some nerve. I was actually planning to place an order today. Nah, I'm out. Who'd dare buy from them when they treat their customers like this? Let's just go. I don't feel like watching. Let's check out a different dealership. A couple of customers slammed the price lists in their hands on the desk before walking straight out the door. The store manager, Anthony Harding, went pale. He shoved me aside and tried to usher Marvin in, coaxing, Mr. Haas, please calm down. Come inside. I'll personally take care of everything. This guy doesn't know any better, so please don't take it personally. However, I got right in front of them. No. He can't come inside. Marvin, who had just barely calmed down, flew into a rage. Are you out of your damn mind? Shaking off Anthony's hand, he stormed up to me. Who do you think you are? Do you even know who I am? Do you know how much I've spent here? His hot spit splattered onto my face, but I still refused to budge. I know you spent $4 million here. You got the fully loaded G900 and paid in full. And you picked it up on the 15th of last month. Then why are you blocking my way? I'm here for my free service. Free. It's clearly in the contract in black and white. What right do you have to keep me out? Get the hell out of my way. Marvin was beyond reason now. Refusing to waste another word on me, he tried to push his way inside. I shoved him in the chest, causing him to stumble and almost fall over. The entire place fell into dead silence. Everyone was stunned. A salesperson just shoved a customer? And not just any customer. A guy who'd just dropped $4 million on a car? Anthony's face went as white as a sheet. His lips quivered, but he couldn't say a single word. After Marvin steadied himself, his eyes filled with shock and fury. How dare you push me? Ignoring him, I pulled out my phone to call the police. Engine failure. Protocol 1. There was a second of silence on the other end of the line before a stern voice came through. Copy that. Stay put. 3 minutes away. I hung up right after. Marvin was still ranting angrily into his phone camera, while the onlooking crowd continued whispering among themselves. That was when I noticed that Anthony had stopped talking. His eyes widened, and he stared at me in disbelief. What? What did you just say? Engine failure was the highest level code phrase in the dealership. Once those words were spoken, all transactions had to be suspended. Under normal circumstances, it was only used for emergencies on the level of a fire. Anthony stared at me with an uneasy and shocked expression. Are you sure? I gave a nod. After hesitating for a few seconds, he moved to stand next to me. A second later, police sirens blared from all directions. Marvin, who had been acting all arrogant just moments ago, suddenly looked shaken. I just wanted to get my car serviced. Why did you call the police? Turning to everyone in the showroom, he spread his arms, shouting, Everyone here is a witness. I, Marvin Haas, bought a $4 million car from them. That's $4 million. I came to get the free servicing as stipulated in the contract, but this salesperson not only stopped me at the door, but he also pushed me and called the police on me. I'd like to know what law I broke to deserve this. The crowd broke into chatter again. He's right. Why call the police? Is getting our car serviced a crime now? Yeah, this is seriously over the line. Who's going to risk buying from them now? This is blatant bullying of customers by a big company. If even a guy who spent $4 million gets treated like trash, Folks like us, who can only spend a few $100,000, wouldn't even get past the entrance. Marvin continued to make a scene, getting the crowd worked up, but he kept sneaking looks at the police car getting closer. Since I've got things to do today, I can't be bothered to deal with you people. But mark my words, this isn't over. With that, Marvin turned, looking eager to leave. The more anxious he looked, the more obvious it was that he was hiding something. I snapped my head toward Anthony. He was frowning too, clearly sensing something was off. We exchanged a glance, and he gave a slight nod. I immediately stepped forward to grab Marvin by the wrist. Anthony came around from the side and, without a word, blocked the other side of the glass door. We stood side by side, completely sealing off the exit. Color drained from Marvin's face instantly. He looked at us, then at the police car getting closer outside, and gulped. What are you doing? Are you trying to keep me here? You think you can restrict my freedom? This is false imprisonment. He whipped out his phone with trembling hands before he started recording, shoving the camera right in our faces. Everyone, do you see this? This dealership is restricting a customer's freedom in broad daylight. Just so you know, I'm posting this online immediately. The whole country will know what kind of dealership this is. I'll make sure you never sell a single car again. Dave Patel, my coworker, was the first to crack. He jogged over to me. Could this be a mistake? Mr. Haas is one of our longtime customers. If you keep this up and he actually posts the video, our reputation will be done for. My other coworker, Ivan Moran, came over too with a pale face. Yeah, Julian. I just closed a deal on an S-Class. The customer's ready to pay, and he's watching all of this at the entrance right now. If the deal falls through, my sales performance for the month will be done for. When Marvin heard what Ivan and Dave said, his expression shifted from panic to smugness. Did you hear that? Looks like your coworkers are smarter than you. I'll say this one last time. Get out of my way. If you don't, not only will I post the video, but I'll also file a complaint and sue all of you. As he spoke, he tried to force his way out. I tightened my grip on his wrist, refusing to budge. Anthony shifted sideways in response, leaving no gap between us. Marvin was getting frantic and red-eyed. Damn it. Let go of me. Let me go. He abruptly swung his arm hard, his elbow striking me right in the left eye. Pain shot through me in an instant. My vision went black for a second. Something warm trickled down from my brow. Everyone in the showroom went silent. With a murderous look in his eyes, Marvin raised his fist once more. You bastard, you don't know when to quit, do you? You still dare stand in my way. Before he could swing again, a shout came from behind me. What are you doing? Stop. As the police officer rushed in, he immediately noticed the blood running down my face. He stepped forward and forcibly separated Marvin and me. That injury looks serious. Don't move around for the time being. He turned toward the staff in the showroom. Is there a first aid kit? The receptionist quickly brought gauze and antiseptic wipes. I pressed the gauze against my brow and was about to speak when Marvin cut in immediately. Officer, perfect timing. You need to settle this for me. He came forward with a look of grievance. Not only are they violating our sales contract, but they're also refusing to let me leave. I only acted in self-defense because I was forced into a corner. They were the ones illegally detaining me first. Ignoring Marvin, the officer stared at me. Were you the one who called us, saying engine failure? I nodded without hesitation. His face grew even more stern. You do know that making a false police report can land you in jail, right? My answer was immediate. I know, but I'm certain it's him. What made you so certain? Marvin couldn't contain himself anymore. Breathing heavily, he barked. What do you mean by it's me? You're just picking a fight with me because you have nothing better to do. Paying him no attention, I said in a calm but decisive tone, his car. He did a good job covering it up, but his car gave him away. Marvin's face twisted in an instant as he tensed up noticeably. What about my car? My car is fine. I paid him no mind, pointing at the black G900 parked outside the showroom. It's that one. Check the trunk. Something is leaking out. Everyone turned to look where I was pointing. At the entrance, the brand new black G900 was there. It had a classy, luxurious shine to it. But along the edge of the trunk lid, there was a streak of dark red. That wasn't oil, water, or ordinary mud. The officer stared at the streak fixedly as he instinctively moved his hand to his radio. When Marvin noticed everyone's stare, he swallowed hard. Beads of sweat formed on his forehead. Even so, he still put on a tough front. What are you all looking at? So what if something's leaking? Isn't it normal for a new car to have a bit of oil leakage? No one said a word in response. The officer just stood there, staring at the stain. His expression grew more serious by the second. Open the trunk. I need to inspect it. Upon hearing that, Marvin snapped. On what grounds? What right do you have to search my car? He took 2 steps back, placing himself in front of his car. This is my car. No one is allowed to check it, not even the police. Although he tried to sound tough, his eyes were wide, and his lips were dry. Those are signs of extreme guilt. Staring at him, I firmly said, "Open the trunk." "You think you can order me around? Who the hell do you think you are?" Clenching his key tightly in his fist, he turned to the police officer. "I'm starting to think that this dealership is trying to extort me. Are you all in on this together?" The officer's expression darkened. "Watch what you say." By now, the showroom was packed wall to wall with onlookers, all filming on their phones. Even though blood was running down my brow, I still hadn't let go of his wrist. Anthony stood right next to me. "Mr. Haas, open the trunk. If you've got nothing to hide, then this will be all over once everyone has a look. But if you refuse, then I have to assume there is something you don't want seen." Under the pressure of the crowd, Marvin slowly turned pale. The officer frowned. "Sir, if you cooperate, and there's nothing wrong, this will be resolved quickly. Your refusal will only raise suspicion." Marvin's hands started shaking. After a long pause, he loosened his grip. The key fell to the ground with a sharp clink. He glared at me, his eyes growing cold and threatening. "Fine. Take a look then. But you're going to regret this." I picked up the key before heading over to the rear of the car. I took a deep breath. The entire place went silent as I inserted the key. But inside the trunk was empty. There were no red stains or suspicious packages, only a spotless black carpet. The crowd went eerily quiet. Marvin broke into a nasty grin. "See? There's nothing. My car is spotless." He strode up to the police officer, pointing at me. "This guy's making false accusations. He hit me, pushed me, and restricted my freedom. I'm pressing charges." The officer turned to me. The suspicion in his eyes had turned into disappointment. "And where is the thing you claimed?" Anthony walked over to look inside as well, and his face fell. Dave finally broke the silence. "See? I knew it. There's no way Mr. Haas is that kind of person. Great. Now our reputation is ruined." Ivan approached us. "My S-Class deal just fell through." The customer walked away. While the crowd began to disperse, Marvin straightened his collar. "Officer, I want him charged. Also, I'm going to sue this dealership." "Le officier site. You'll need to come with us to give a statement." I stood there, my eyes locked on the G900. No, something didn't add up. For dark liquid to be leaking out from the gap of the trunk meant it couldn't have been this clean on the inside. I walked slowly around the car, and then suddenly stopped. A thought broke through my mental fog in an instant. "That's it. What the hell are you talking about?" Marvin sneered, though his voice pitched slightly higher than before. He tried to slam the trunk lid down, but I caught it with my right hand, ignoring the sharp pain radiating from my split eyebrow. "The volume," I said, my voice steady, carrying clearly across the quiet showroom. "The G900 Bespoke Long Wheelbase Edition has a cargo capacity of exactly 580 liters. The distance from the trunk sill to the back of the rear executive seats is 1.2 meters. The vertical depth from the upper lip to the floor pan is exactly 65 centimeters to clear the active rear air suspension reservoirs." I reached into the trunk, bypassed the clean black carpet, and knocked my knuckles against the floor. Thud. It didn't make the hollow, metallic ring of a standard trunk pan. It was a dull, heavy deadened sound, like knocking on solid lead. "This floor is raised by nearly 15 centimeters, I said, looking directly at Marvin. "You didn't just buy a G900. You had it heavily customized. But this isn't a factory option. The factory doesn't use aftermarket sound deadening mats to seal a steel plate over the spare tire well." For Marvin's face went from pale to an ugly, mottled gray. "You're insane. It's an aftermarket audio system. I had subwoofers installed. It's private property. An audio system requires amplifiers and wiring," I replied, my fingers tracing the edge of the chrome trim. "But there are no audio cables running through the side panels. And more importantly, subwoofer enclosures don't leak dark red, iron-scented fluid." Or the police officer, whose name tag read Officer Miller, stepped closer. He looked at the trunk floor, then at Marvin's twitching hands. "Mr. Haas, does this vehicle have an aftermarket modification?" "I don't have to answer that," Marvin shouted, his bravado crumbling into panic. "This is harassment. I'm leaving." He lunged forward, grabbing for the key in my hand. But I was already moving. I stepped back, keeping the key out of his reach. "Officer," I said, "look at the rear wheel arches. The car is empty, yet the rear suspension is compressed by at least 2 inches. There is significant weight hidden under that floor." Miller didn't hesitate anymore. He unclipped his baton, using the metal tip to press hard against the edge of the carpet where the false floor met the side panel. As he pried it back, a thick, dark, viscous red fluid began to well up, bubbling through the seam. For it wasn't transmission fluid. It wasn't engine oil. It was blood. "Step back." Miller barked, drawing his service weapon in one smooth motion. Sir, put your hands on your head. Do it now. Marvin didn't put his hands on his head. With the desperate speed of a trapped animal, he reached into his heavy winter coat. Gun. Ivan screamed, throwing himself behind a nearby desk. The showroom erupted into chaos. Customers shrieked, dropping to the floor or scrambling toward the exits. Price lists, brochures, and coffee cups scattered across the polished tile floor. Marvin pulled a compact, matte black semi-automatic pistol from his inner pocket. His eyes were wide and bloodshot. He didn't aim at Miller, he aimed directly at me. You ruined it, Marvin hissed, his finger tightening on the trigger. You just had to be the smart guy, didn't you, Julian? Before he could fire, I threw myself to the left, crashing into a heavy metal stanchion that held the velvet rope. The heavy iron base swung outward, clipping Marvin's shin. The gun went off with a deafening bang that shattered the high ceiling lights above us. Shower of glass rained down on the G900's pristine paintwork. Miller fired back, but Marvin was already scrambling backward, using the G900's armored driver's side door as a shield. The G900's glass was rated for ballistic protection, a custom spec Marvin had insisted on. The officer's rounds ricocheted harmlessly off the reinforced glass, leaving white, spiderweb cracks. Drop the weapon, Miller yelled, seeking cover behind a concrete pillar. Marvin didn't drop it. He knew he was finished if he stayed. He turned and bolted through the shattered glass entryway of the showroom, running out onto the busy 6-lane boulevard outside. Anthony, call for backup. Active shooter. Miller yelled into his radio as he pursued Marvin into the daylight. I pushed myself up from the floor. My left eye was swelling shut from Marvin's earlier elbow strike, and a fresh trickle of blood was running down my cheek. But my mind was entirely focused on one thing. The G900's trunk. The fluid was still slowly bubbling out. If there was someone down there, they were running out of time. Julian, what are you doing? Anthony yelled from behind a desk, his voice shaking. Wait for the police. There's someone in there, Anthony, I said, my voice deadpan. And they're suffocating. I grabbed a heavy steel tire iron from a display rack near the service bay entrance and ran to the back of the G900. I shoved the flat edge of the iron into the seam of the false floor and leaned my entire weight onto it. The metal groaned. The industrial silicone Marvin had used to seal the compartment began to tear, releasing a foul, metallic stench that made my stomach turn. Dave, who had been cowering near the partition, slowly crept forward. His face was white, but seeing me struggle, his instinct as a mechanic's son kicked in. He grabbed another pry bar from the tool trolley and shoved it into the opposite side. On 3, Dave muttered, his eyes wide. 1, 2, 3, heave. With a loud metallic snap, the welded steel plate buckled upward. We stared into the dark, insulated cavity beneath. My heart stopped. It wasn't a collection of stolen goods, and it wasn't just contraband. Inside the custom-built, insulated steel box was a young man. He was bound hand and foot with heavy-duty zip ties. A thick layer of duct tape sealed over his mouth. His skin was a deathly, translucent pale, and his clothes were soaked in sweat and dark red blood. A medical-grade 4 line was crudely taped to his forearm, connected to a plastic bag of clear fluid that had run dry. The blood we had seen leaking was coming from a ruptured vein where the 4 needle had dislodged during Marvin's erratic driving, mixing with the melting condensation of a commercial cooling unit installed to keep the compartment cold. He's alive, Dave whispered, his hand shaking as he reached down to touch the young man's neck. But his pulse is incredibly weak. He's barely breathing. Get the scissors from the desk, I ordered. We need to get the tape off his mouth and cut those ties. Anthony ran over, his face a mask of horror. Oh my God, that's Leo Vance. Who? I asked, carefully peeling the duct tape from the young man's blue-tinged lips. Leo Vance, Anthony stammered, his eyes darting to the door. The son of Federal Judge Arthur Vance. He was kidnapped 3 days ago from his university campus. The news has been everywhere. The kidnappers demanded $40 million, or they'd send him back in pieces. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Marvin Haas hadn't bought a $4 million armored car because he was a wealthy enthusiast. He had bought it because it was the perfect, mobile, bulletproof vault. He could transport a high-profile kidnap victim through police checkpoints without anyone suspecting a thing. And he had brought it to our dealership for free maintenance, to use our secure, private wash bay to clean up the blood and chemical residue without attracting attention from his neighbors or public cameras. Julian, he's stopping, Dave said, his voice rising in panic. His chest isn't moving. I didn't think. I climbed into the tight trunk space, tilted Leo's head back, and began CPR. 1, 2, 3, 4. I pressed down on his chest, counting the seconds in my head. The showroom. Around us was silent, save for the distant, approaching wail of dozens of police sirens. Come on, I muttered, pressing down again. Don't die in this car. Not today. On the 15th compression, Leo gasped. A weak, rattling breath escaped his lips, and his eyelids fluttered. At that exact moment, a swarm of heavily armed police officers and paramedics burst through the shattered front doors, their weapons raised. Hands in the air. Nobody move. 2 hours later, I sat in a cold, sterile interview room at the police headquarters. A paramedic had cleaned the cut on my brow and applied 3 stitches, but I had refused to change out of my bloodstained dealership uniform. The door opened, and a tall woman in a sharp charcoal suit walked in. Her badge identified her as Special Agent Sarah Lynn of the FBI's Kidnapping Task Force. She sat down across from me, placing a thick manila folder on the metal table. Mr. Manning, she began, her tone measured and professional. I've just come from the hospital. Leo Vance is in stable condition. The doctors say another 20 minutes in that compartment without oxygen, and he would have suffered irreversible brain damage. You saved his life. I nodded slowly. How is the officer? Miller. He's fine. Marvin Haas was apprehended 3 blocks from the dealership. He tried to hijack a vehicle, but Miller managed to disable him. Haas is currently in custody, refusing to speak. Agent Lynn leaned forward, interlocking her fingers. I've read the preliminary report from the local police. They're calling you a hero. But I have some questions. You're a car salesman. How did you know there was a false floor in that G900? How did you know to call Protocol 1? I've been selling luxury cars for 10 years, I said, my voice low. You don't become the top salesman by just reading the brochures. I know every weld, every bolt, and every suspension specification of the vehicles I sell. When Marvin brought that car in, the rear end was sitting too low for an empty vehicle. The G900 has self-leveling air suspension. It should have corrected itself within 30 seconds of the engine starting. It didn't. That meant the suspension compressor had been disconnected or modified. I took a sip of the lukewarm water they had provided. And Protocol 1 is a security code established by our dealership group after a high-profile carjacking 10 years ago. It's meant for emergencies where a vehicle is being used in a violent crime on the premises. I didn't know Leo Vance was in there, but I knew Marvin was hiding something heavy, something that was leaking human blood. Lynn watched me closely, searching for any sign of deception. Marvin Haas has been a customer of your dealership for 3 years. He's bought 4 high-end vehicles. Did you ever suspect him before? No, I admitted. He always paid in full, always seemed polite if a bit arrogant. But looking back, he always insisted on taking delivery of his vehicles at night, and he always refused the standard pre-delivery inspections. We let it slide because he was a high-value client. We were blind because of the money. L'inside, opening herfoller. Well, your high-value client is actually a logistics coordinator for the Moretti cartel. They specialize in high-stakes kidnappings and smuggling. The G900 was purchased using shell companies funded by cartel money. They needed a vehicle that could withstand small arms fire and transport high-value targets across state lines. She stood up and extended her hand. You did a brave thing, Mr. Manning. But I have to warn you. The Moretti cartel doesn't take kindly to losing $50 million leverage assets. Haas was supposed to deliver Leo Vance to a secure location tonight. Since he failed, his associates are going to be very angry, and they know exactly who stopped him. The dealership was closed the next day, the entire property taped off as a federal crime scene. I spent the afternoon in my small apartment on the outskirts of the city, staring at the ceiling. The silence was deafening compared to the chaos of the day before. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Marvin's bloodshot eyes, the cold barrel of his gun, and the pale blue-lipped face of Leo Vance. Around 6 p.m., my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. It was an unknown number. I hesitated before picking it up. Julian Manning. You shouldn't have opened the trunk, salesman. The voice was low, distorted, and cold. There was a faint background hiss, like the sound of static or a bad cellular connection. Who is this? I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. It doesn't matter who I am, the voice replied. What matters is what you cost us. $50 million. And our brother, Marvin. You thought you were a hero. Julian? You're just a guy who sells metal boxes to people who actually run this city. The police have Marvin, I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking. And the FBI knows about your operation. A low, dry chuckle came through the line. The police can't protect you. The FBI can't watch you every second of the day. You have 24 hours to leave the city. If you're still here, we'll make sure your next ride is in the back of a G900. And we won't leave any air holes. The line went dead. I stood in my kitchen, the phone cold against my ear. My first instinct was to call Agent Lin. But as I reached for the dial, a chilling thought stopped me. How did they get my personal cell phone number? It wasn't listed on the dealership's public website. Only the dealership's internal database had my private contact information. Someone inside the dealership had given them my number. Someone I worked with was on the cartel's payroll. I didn't call the FBI. Instead, I drove back to the dealership under the cover of dusk. The police tape was still fluttering in the evening breeze, but the cruisers were gone. The showroom was dark, the shattered glass door covered with a temporary plywood board. I used my manager's key card, a privilege of being the top salesman, to slip through the side employee entrance. The interior smelled of stale coffee, burnt ozone, and the faint, sweet scent of copper. I made my way to the administrative offices in the back. The computers were off, their black screens reflecting the pale green light of the exit signs. I sat down at my desk and booted up the terminal, logging into the dealership's Customer Relationship Management (CRM) database. I needed to see who had accessed my employee profile over the last 48 hours. The system log was a long stream of alphanumeric codes. I scrolled through the access history, my eyes straining in the dim light. At 10:14 a.m. yesterday, just an hour after Marvin Haas was arrested, someone had accessed my personal file. They had copied my home address, my personal phone number, and my emergency contact information. The user login used for the search was a Harding. Anthony Harding, the store manager. My stomach dropped. Anthony had been the one who tried to usher Marvin inside, the one who tried to brush off my concerns, the one who had gone pale when I mentioned engine failure. He wasn't just trying to protect a sale. He was trying to protect his co-conspirator. Looking for something, Julian? I spun around. Anthony was standing in the doorway of the office. He wasn't wearing his usual tailored suit. He was in a dark windbreaker, his face cast in shadow. In his right hand he held a heavy silver revolver. Anthony, I said slowly, keeping my hands visible on the desk. You gave them my number. I didn't have a choice, Anthony said, his voice cracking with emotion. You don't understand the kind of people Marvin works for. They don't take no for an answer. When Marvin approached me a year ago, he offered me a simple deal. I ensure his cars are delivered without inspection. I look the other way when he uses the wash bays after hours, and I get a 5% cut of his logistics fees. 5% of a kidnapping is still blood money, Anthony, I said. It was $2 million, Julian. Anthony shouted, his hand shaking as he raised the revolver. 2 million. Do you know how many cars I have to sell to make that kind of money? How many arrogant, rich bastards I have to smile at? I was tired of waiting. I was tired of being the manager while you got all the glory and the top commissions. He stepped closer, the barrel of the gun pointing directly at my chest. They told me to clean up the mess. They said if I eliminate the only witness who can connect the dealership's internal logs to the cartel's transport schedule, they'll get me out of the country. I'm sorry, Julian. You really are the best salesman I've ever seen. But you should have let him get his free service. You're right, I said, my voice remarkably calm. I should have. Anthony blinked, taken aback by my lack of fear. What? I should have let him in, I repeated, leaning back in my chair, keeping my movements slow and non-threatening. If I had, Marvin would have driven that G900 into the service bay. The mechanics would have raised it on the hydraulic lift. And do you know what happens when you lift a G900 with an active air suspension system while the compressor is disconnected? Anthony's brow furrowed. He was a manager, but he hadn't been a salesman or a mechanic in 20 years. He didn't know the technical details. What are you talking about? The airbags in the rear suspension are pressurized to over 150 psi, I explained, leaning forward, capturing his attention. It was the same tone I used when explaining the safety features of an S-Class to a skeptical buyer. Without the compressor's electronic release valve active, the sudden drop in pressure on the lift causes the air lines to rupture. It's a safety hazard. The manual says it can cause a sudden, explosive decompression right next to the rear wheel wells. I pointed toward the window, out toward the dark showroom. If that had happened, the blast would have ruptured the custom steel plate Marvin welded into the trunk. The noise would have been deafening. The blood would have leaked all over the service bay floor in front of 5 mechanics. You wouldn't have just lost your $2 million, Anthony. You would have been exposed right then and there. Anthony's eyes darted toward the window, his mind racing as he tried to process the information. You're lying. You're just trying to stall. Am I I reached slowly toward my pocket. Don't move, Anthony yelled, tightening his grip on the gun. I'm just getting my keys, Anthony, I said softly. The keys to the G900. The police left the car in our holding bay out back until the transport flatbed arrives tomorrow. I still have the master fob. I pulled out the heavy leather-bound key fob and held it up. You want to get out of the country? You want to escape the cartel and the FBI? The G900 is armored. It has run-flat tires, bulletproof glass, and a reinforced chassis. But more importantly, the GPS log on this key has the coordinates of Marvin's drop-off point, the safe house, the place where the $40 million was supposed to be delivered. I stood up, holding the key fob out toward him. Take the key, Anthony. Go to the safe house, take the money, and run. Leave me here. If you kill me, the FBI will know it was an inside job within an hour. They'll check the server logs, they'll see your login, and they'll hunt you down before you reach the state line. Anthony stared at the key fob. The greed that had corrupted him was plain on his face. He wanted the money. He wanted the way out. Give it to me, he whispered, stepping forward. He reached out his left hand to grab the fob. At that exact millisecond, I pressed the panic button on the fob. Outside in the dark showroom, the G900's security system didn't just beep. Because it was a custom spec, the panic alarm triggered the vehicle's high-intensity, 10,000 lumen matrix LED high beams, which were positioned directly facing the glass window of the administrative office. The dark office was instantly flooded with a blinding, white light so intense it felt like a flashbang. Anthony screamed, instinctively throwing his hand up to shield his eyes from the agonizing glare. I lunged over the desk. My shoulder slammed into his chest, knocking him backward onto the hard tile floor. The revolver fired into the ceiling, the blast deafening in the enclosed office. I grabbed his right wrist, slamming it against the edge of a filing cabinet until his fingers loosened and the gun clattered away into the darkness. Anthony fought like a wild animal, punching and clawing at my face, tearing at the stitches on my forehead. But I didn't let go. I locked my forearm under his chin, applying a tight sleeper hold I had learned during my years in the military reserve. It's over, Anthony, I muttered into his ear as he struggled. The sale is closed. Within 30 seconds, his movements slowed, and he went limp in my arms. I let him slide to the floor, panting heavily, my chest heaving as the adrenaline slowly drained from my system. The matrix headlights of the G900 continued to flash in the background, casting long, rhythmic shadows across the ruined office. I reached down, picked up the silver revolver, and slipped it into my pocket. Then, I pulled out my phone and dialed Agent Lynn. This is Julian Manning, I said when she answered. I have the leak. And I have the coordinates to the cartel's safe house. 3 months later, the autumn air was crisp and cool as I stood in the newly renovated showroom of the dealership. The shattered glass had been replaced with reinforced, double-paned panels. The bloodstains were gone, the floors polished to a mirror-like shine. Anthony Harding was currently awaiting trial in a federal penitentiary facing charges of conspiracy to commit kidnapping, attempted murder, and money laundering. The Moretti cartel's local cell had been completely dismantled, thanks to the coordinates found on the G900's secure NAV system. Ivan and Dave were still working the floor, though they treated me with a quiet, almost reverent respect now. Julian, Ivan said, walking over with a clipboard. There's a customer at the door. He's asking for you specifically. I turned. Walking into the showroom was a young man in a simple college hoodie. He looked healthy, his skin had regained its color, and his eyes were bright. It was Leo Vance. Behind him stood an older man in a tailored, dark blue suit with a silver pin on his lapel, Federal Judge Arthur Vance. Mr. Manning, the judge said, extending a hand as I approached. His grip was firm, but his eyes were filled with an emotion that no amount of money could buy. I wanted to come here personally to thank you. The police told me what you did. You didn't just save my son's life. You risked your own to ensure those monsters were stopped. I was just doing my job, sir, I said quietly, shaking his hand. Your job is selling cars, Mr. Manning, the judge said with a warm smile. What you did was something entirely different. Leo stepped forward, looking around the pristine showroom. I hear you're the top salesman in the state, Julian. I try to be, I replied. Well, Leo said, pointing toward a beautiful midnight blue executive sedan, sitting in the center of the floor. I'm in the market for a new car. Something safe. Something with a very standard, unmodified trunk. I smiled, the tension that had held my shoulders tight for the last 3 months finally slipping away. I have just the one for you, Leo, I said, gesturing toward the vehicle. Let me show you the safety features. It has active lane assist, 10 airbags, and the trunk volume is exactly 500 liters. No more, no less. As we walked toward the car, I felt the familiar, comfortable rhythm of the sales pitch returning. The world was a chaotic, unpredictable place full of dark corners and dangerous men. But in here, under the bright lights of the showroom, everything was clear. The specifications were exact, the terms were black and white, and for the first time in a long time, the transaction was entirely clean.